Hello there. Let's talk about Burkina Faso. Now, Captain Ibrahim Traore is a Burkinabe military officer, a politician, and has served as interim president of Burkina Faso since 2022 to date. Now, he is proving to be one of the best presidents an African country has ever had. Now, however, the mission of ending his life is underway, and this is just because his style of leadership does not sit well with the West. So the attempts to eliminate him has nevertheless failed as more as 20 times. Now, this is the same script which has been played over the years against leaders like Muammar Gaddafi, Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, Saddam Hussein, and many more countries based on propaganda machines in which has left these countries worse and destabilized than they used to be before. Now, according to Americans and their oligarchs, people of Burkina Faso are suffering under Ibrahim Traore, and they need to be freed from this bad leadership. I think this is where the word suffering and bad leadership means directly the opposite of what Americans should understand. Now, according to Europeans and Americans, Africa is always accompanied with acute poverty, lack of democracy and leadership, hunger, and so on. And therefore, Africa should always be helped by force. And this always portrays Europe and America coming in as a result as the only saviors. But now, Africa is not necessarily always suffering as you think. It is only that the West always paint negative propaganda against Africa, make Africa look dependent and lazy by default, and then the West come in as a result with handouts. So there, they force African leaders to act as puppets in exchange for unchallenged leadership and support. And therefore, this will promote the interest of the West. Yes! And these African leaders, as a result, they provide an open path for the West to loot Africa dry. And this is part of what President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso is trying to fight against. What you should also know is that not every kind of instability that you see in Africa is African-made. Most problems in Africa are created and funded by the West, just to destabilize Africa with the aim of maintaining dominance across the African continent. Yes! Remember, a more destabilized Africa is weaker than a united one, and this favors the West by a large margin. Now, Africa experiences several problems like coup attempts, terrorist groups, rebellions, radical opposition movements here and there, almost all funded by the West, just to destabilize the continent. And this is a wake-up call for Africa to wake up, since times have changed and the world is getting enlightened just beyond media propaganda, in which whatever Ibrahim Traore right now is doing for his country is satisfactory and appreciative to all the Burkinabe people. Moreover, even most American and European citizens themselves are in support of the excellent work that is being done by President Ibrahim Traore. Therefore, African people and African continent as a bloc is in support of Ibrahim Traore, which is clear indication and evident that what Americans are seeing and claiming against him is totally false propaganda painted against his leadership with selfish interests against his country. Yes! And with this, Ibrahim Traore as a result has become a symbol of good leadership and unity across the African continent. Now, as a case study, look at Libya before, look at Libya now. Look at Syria before, look at Syria now. Look at Iraq before, look at Iraq now. Look at Afghanistan before and now. Look at Palestine and many more other countries across the world. Nothing constructive has ever come up later after the so-called Western invasion to save those countries. Hypocrisy is almost a common song with the West because an African traveling to Europe or USA shall need thorough scrutiny and even denied visa or even deported back to Africa. But a European coming to Africa shall never be treated the same way an African is being handled while migrating to their Western land. Now, Africa's minerals, resources, riches are highly welcome in the West and America. But Africans as people are not welcome. Yes! This is ridiculous. Jesus! I am also quite sure that most Africans are not willing to leave Africa. Yes! for the Western world. But it is because Africa has been interfered with for a long time and left the continent vulnerable and destabilized. Weapons that are being brought into Africa by the West are used for civil wars, military coups, rebellions, and robberies that has made Africans believe that the only option and peaceful place to be is in Europe or USA, which has made Africans end up there as refugees, searching for better life and greener pastures, but not because we want. Now, this is what you need to understand. You cannot look at the speck in your brother's eye but fail to notice the beam in your own eye. Yes! The USA that wants to go to save Burkina Faso because they are suffering is the same USA which is battling racism, homelessness, school shootings, gender identity crisis, skyrocketing costs of living, and so on. Jesus! But they cannot see that. But they can be able to see what is happening far away in Africa. Now, this narrative of Western style of democracy is losing meaning and relevancy, and Africa needs to change whether there is elections or not. Most African countries with Western style of democracy are still complaining of corruption, poor leadership, incompetent government structures, and so on. Yes! They also have Western puppet leadership, which has not benefited anything to Africans in any way. And this is what Ibrahim Traore is exposing, showing them that with or without elections, even with a military ruler, Africa can still have the best leadership. And this does not sit well with the Western world because they clearly know that a woke Africa is a threat to the survival of USA and Europe. Now look, the USA and Europe themselves were not built through democracies. Those countries were mostly built through slavery, violence, suffering, looting other continents to death, and so on. Yes! Africa is even becoming the worst continent to live in because of puppet leaders who dance to the tune of America and the West, and ready even to betray Ibrahim Traore. Now, there was something which was going on in Uganda. It was called Guild Leaders Summit 2025, whereby our former Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta was clearly quoted saying that nobody outside Africa is coming to save you. Do not have that misguided thought. This is a call for action. Get up now and start moving. That's what he said. Remember, we have enough chaos in Africa, which the West has even failed to solve. Yes! Like the internal conflict in Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Mali, South Sudan, occasional rise of Boko Haram in Nigeria, internal conflicts in Mozambique, Cameroon, Democratic Republic of Congo, political instabilities in Chad, Burundi, Niger, and so on. So why Burkina Faso now? Why? Africans must wake up. Yes! Because we may be having conflicts and you do not know who is the actual sponsor for these conflicts. Jesus! The sponsor is the usual suspect. I think you should know. In Africa, elections are great, but unfortunately, it is not about elections. Jesus! Democracy is the best, but unfortunately, it is not about democracy. Term limits is the way to go. Yes! But unfortunately, it is not about term limits. Great leadership in Africa is possible if only you have the right leaders doing the right things for the people. Chai! Africa, yes! It is time to rise up, without which Africa is still here as a punching bag. This man! Follow me on Instagram, X Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and above all, subscribe to my YouTube channel for more exclusive information beyond this. Bye-bye.